When the mother became agitated around our planning decisions and remained agitated whether we tried to include her or not, I, of course, as you already know, put it off on the mother. But I also took note of her feelings here and allowed them to penetrate my consciousness someplace, or I would not have them here now to tell you about them. But in our main body, Heart and I felt the mother was not leaving us in peace to do what we wanted to do, or in the way we wanted to do it. In other words, she was not, as we judged it, opening the space for us that we wanted to have. When we denied expression of our feelings here, we entered into some serious denials. When we tried to include the mother more than we really wanted to, the mother gave us the reflection of being patronizing and phony with her. She had feelings of being unable to trust our intent. Our feelings of annoyance started growing into rage the more we felt we extended ourselves on her behalf, and she was unappreciative. We saw ourselves as being the epitome of self-control when it came to the mother, and we saw her as provoking us with her unappreciative and even defiant behavior. When the mother called forth the Father of Manifestation, we felt extremely provoked. I especially. Heart allowed me to notice how I felt here by giving me the impression I was not right to feel as I felt about another brother coming along. Heart wanted me to see him as a brother of his, but I saw him as a rival. I had gapped once already over the issue of rivalry from the mother, and I feared I might do it again. The mother already knew I feared losing control of this energy again, and yet she seemed to have deliberately brought something into my life that was immediately challenging my ability to retain control. Heart and I both feared loss of control on my part. We feared what might happen then. We thought the way to retain control was to control our emotions, and we were extremely provoked to find the mother so incorrigible here. She seemed like a naughty and defiant child, always doing the thing we least wanted her to do. We didn't feel ready for any Father of Manifestation, and that seemed to make the mother all more interested in calling him forth. We had no sense of her triggering us to release what we were holding, or that it would bring us what we needed. Instead, we decided the mother was extremely provocative to the point of being oppositional, and that if we did lose control, it would be the mother's fault, and that she would then deserve whatever she got. Since the will depends on spirit for the consciousness with which to understand the feelings, and since spirit cannot give the right understandings unless the feelings are fully received, these denials went into a deadlock. The mother felt this in us and interpreted it as a signal from us that she was to hold back her feelings even more. Her anger was already afraid to come forward, and our lack of acceptance for her feelings when she could not already explain them to us made the mother much more uncertain of herself than she would have been otherwise. Real feelings were getting more and more buried in denials and polarized into viewpoints. We weren't able to receive from them, at the time, the gift of understanding they had to offer. None of us was able to realize that the mother's agitation was because of the will denial already present, or that she couldn't settle down because of sensing that something was missing. This lack of openness between us made it so that the missing element, our own fourth principle, form, the obvious component if creation were to take place, already present, yet not born into self-awareness, the Father of Manifestation, had to be called forth from a place of shame, fear, guilt, and denied rage towards spirit, and not moving to recognize the role of form in creation. The mother's intuition was guided by a first knowledge that was not being credited to our consciousness. This intuition felt the Father of manifestation had to be there, and that the gap being caused between body and spirit by his lack of presence could not be allowed to widen any further, but did not have the peace of being accepted. We made the mother feel wrong about needing the Father of manifestation to feel satisfied. We did not see the completion of the firm foundation of creation in him because we were all so agitated by the denials involved. We were already so afraid of what we were denying that we feared these areas couldn't be gone into. We were literally trying to bury them, especially since I had found that we couldn't go back and do things over as though they had never happened in ways we didn't like the first time. We had the power to pretend, but what we had judged as our mistakes weren't really being healed. The will was taking this as, what's done is done. There's no point in getting upset about it. Another judgment that went into the will was, nothing can be done about it. What good is getting upset going to do? It will only make matters worse. The will felt herself being told she must hold back emotion, but she also already felt herself being damaged when she did this. These judgments against the will multiplied the pain, the horror, the terror, and the even more deeply denied rage in the will, because the will was experiencing herself being damaged in the isolation of no acceptance for her experience other than being told there was nothing that could be done about it that would really help. What's done is done and can't really be changed. The will became deeply imprinted with the belief that real healing is impossible. All later attempts to help the will have been tried in the face of this deep belief in the will that was not moved. Instead, it was further compounded by our reactions to our inability to help the will. Our inconsistencies didn't bother us. We viewed ourselves as moving right along and not holding on to anything that troubled us from the past. It was the will who could not let bygones be bygones. We were looking perfect, and it was by virtue of what was falling away from us into the lost will. It was the will's problem if she wanted to hold on to all of this garbage instead of letting go of it as we had done. The more she held on to it, the less we liked it, and the less we liked her. Part of the will believed us here and felt like the terrible failure we made her out to be, but in another part of the will, the feeling grew in rage and terror that I was deliberately destroying the will, either because I was hopelessly stupid and unreceptive to evolving my mind, or I was of wicked intent. The lost will moving now is going to heal all of this, but has been in place for so long that giving it another reality is going to take a lot of movement. By the same token, there will not be a time that will be easier for you than now. Even so, the mother is still afraid that what has never been acceptable still isn't. Heart had denied hatred toward the will in many of the same ways that I did. Heart did not come along to manifest the rainbow spirits because he could not stand the position he had in the relationship. With the mother viewing Heart as having come between us, she was trying to go around Heart to reach me directly as she had in the past. It infuriated her to feel she could only approach her mate through her child, and she felt it wasn't right. Heart felt just as infuriated in response and they both felt very guilty about having these feelings of rage, jealousy, competition, and hatred. Hart felt the mother was trying to leave him out and make him feel that his position wasn't right whenever it came to matters she thought should be just between us. She wanted Hart to find his own will, as though he was no longer the intimate part of us we had felt himself to be before he was born. Hart particularly resented this when the mother allowed the father of manifestation near her in ways she didn't even receive me. I was furiously jealous and allowed nothing to move here, and Hart was furious over being denied. Hart felt so denied when we manifested the rainbow spirits that Hart of the rainbow spirits was commensurately denied. How could the rainbow spirits accept Hart if their parents didn't have Hart manifest with them? Hart thought his right place was among the angels and the heart of the rainbow spirits, but he did not feel like it was his right place. Hart has felt displaced in creation without understanding why. Because of the denials involved, Hart thought he was not an accepted part of the Godhead where adult matters, such as manifesting spirits, were concerned. Hart got the idea that his presence wasn't welcome for conception or birthing, and he had blame for the mother for this. Denials here have made Hart presence difficult or missing for orgasm and birthing in the manifested spirits. The reflection of this intensity of emotion around the belief is shown in the outrage over the idea that Jesus might have had sex. Imagine the outrage that might occur if it were suggested he wanted to have sex with his mother and she with him. The mother allowed Hart whenever it seemed fitting in our relationship, according to her ability to handle it then, and even sometimes when she didn't feel comfortable about it, because guilt held her back from full expression of how she felt. The lack of emotional movement both included and excluded Hart because of feelings that were not in balance. Thus, his right place could not be felt. Neither the mother nor Hart were able to resolve this in themselves any more than mothers now feel it is all right to have children in the bedroom during sex, or to accept touch from their husbands of a sexual nature during the waking hours of the family, or to let children witness the births of their siblings. When these experiences are allowed, they are allowed in the presence of undercurrents that are not coming forward for expression, but are creating something as a result of their presence nonetheless. What needs to move here are all the feelings involved in these situations, and not just some of them. In situations where beliefs say openness should be present, and the forms of this are taken on without full alignment in the will, guilt and sexual shame are denied whenever undercurrents are being ignored. This is how denied guilt fragments get created, and there are certainly many of them. An example of some of the less harmful ones who go out and act out an openness that is not really there are the sexual swingers, who will tell you that any combination is good as long as body gets excited, because body response means it must be all right. At the time, I thought I was doing all right with Hart because I had shoved all of my denials into will and body and saw them as giving me trouble. Some lost will took this to mean I was gay because I loved Hart more than the will. The more this split widened, the more men have felt like they have more love for other men than they have for women. Another issue involved in Will's attitude towards Hart is how hard it is for mothers to raise their sons in ways that really prepare them to take on any real roles as fathers. Immediately, many of you will want to say this isn't true. But look at how many women complain that men are like children who have to be constantly looked after, who are emotionally dependent on them, and who, at least in a part of themselves, see their wives as being the same as their mothers. Mothers do not usually allow their sons to develop emotionally any more than their fathers do. Mothers have a rage at their sons, which they have not allowed themselves to notice, because they are focusing all of it on their sexual partners, forgetting their sexual partners were once sons. The answer is as simple as this, really. When men are not allowed to open their wills fully, whatever fullness is lost there is lost from their entire character. Without full participation of the will, it is impossible to fully understand what is happening to you. And without full understanding, true revolution is not possible. No matter what outward behavior changes people train themselves to make, they are no more evolved than they are open to their will's movement, and opening to another where you are closed yourself is not possible. There is no real way to heal this other than to go back to the places where emotions were stopped and reestablish the flow and evolution from there. This also includes going to the places where the mother cut the son off from affection he wanted to have. The mother has issues with heart that need to move now. The mother sees heart as coming between spirit and will. The idea that a firstborn pleases the father more if it is a son enrages the mother toward the father, but also toward the son. It is guilt that has not allowed these feelings to move. Feeling the fear of how unloving you must be to have hatred and rage towards heart is an important fear to feel, so that you have openness instead of more denied guilt that will reflect to you as lack of acceptance. I would like to spend a moment on the role of grief here also. Grief is a reaction to splits of any kind, real or imagined. Inasmuch as you fear certain feelings, means splits in the family, friends, or love you can receive or give, you will have grief. To whatever extent you are able to move into a real increase in openness, you will have increasing presence of love and increasing joy. Will has experienced heart as a control valve that did not allow free expression or to access to spirit anymore. Parents also feel their relationship limited by the presence of children. It is not a matter of putting the children out of the room for certain things. It is a matter of getting the emotions in motion so that parents can increase the openness between them and children can move back as they need to, or as parents need to, without feeling denied and unaccepting toward what is happening to them. Heart experienced will as trying to push up through it or around it, and as trying to get rid of it. Heart has reached defensively toward will and protectively toward spirit when heart has not liked the feelings coming from will and has felt furious toward the will for what was perceived as unlovingness coming from will toward heart and spirit. Heart has also turned around in this defense of the will, but not as strongly. As much as Hitler was my light in a state of denial, the Nazis were heart denials. As much as heart and I were aligned here, the men who closely aligned with Hitler held spirit-heart denials. As much as body aligned with us, form was given to this hatred. As much as the mother hated herself, this hatred is made manifest. This is why the mother always thinks it is all her fault, but she also needs to know she cannot hold these things indefinitely and avoid manifesting them if there is no movement to change them. As much as we opposed and hated ourselves for having these feelings, and fought them down in ourselves, other orders of father warriors opposed and fought down the ones manifesting these denials. Although we originally fought these feelings down with everything we had, believing our survival depended on it, the father warriors fought Hitler down with a little less than that. They avoided entering the war until they had to, because there are some denials present in the father warriors that had a secret interest in letting it happen until the bald-faced openness of it made it impossible to allow any more without having it reflect on them in ways they did not want it to. You can see it in the way they did not allow many Jews to take refuge in their countries, and in the way arms dealers sell arms to all sides and run black markets that are never stopped. The father warriors were not ready to allow the Jews into their countries any more than I was ready to take the rainbow spirits into the Godhead as a solution. All the things that were felt but not moved because they were judged to be unkind or unloving manifest the judgments against them with so little real movement present in the essence involved that this essence remains trapped until the parental parts allow it to move, or until there is a loss of control someplace resulting from the pressure of holding in the face of the extreme provocation I mentioned. As much as we wanted to hide these denials from ourselves, many aspects of these denials have been acted out in secrecy. History has been lost or cleaned up, and things have been left undiscovered because of lack of intent to bring them forward. As much as we have wanted to hide from the reality of these things having presence with us, we have also had fragmentation and the avoidance of the real feelings involved in any given situation. Another way these denials get in motion is when the ones making the denials feel like the denials are the true feelings they would really like to express, but they dare not because of the lack of acceptance for such feelings that they see around them. Then these denials have the power to go out and do it someplace else, or even to force themselves on others, because the ones making the denials hate the lack of acceptance for what they feel and want to knock it down. When we make such denials, what starts out in secret often gets exposed by the part of us that hates us for having these feelings. No matter which way you go, you cannot win when denial is involved. Even when it looks like you have had a long winning streak, sooner or later the denials catch up with you. The lost will moving here has been waiting a long time for its opportunity. The fight in the Middle East has everything to do with our denials in red, and all the way along with the rainbow spirits for that matter. The Second World War also had to do with these denials, as did all of the other struggles in the history of the Jewish people, including their struggles with the elements, starvation, plagues, and so forth. Moses had the power to help the Jewish people because he was an angel. Because these things have all been acted out in a state of denial, without the light of understanding being able to come in, the movement has not brought healing. Instead, it has fulfilled the judgment patterns that made the judgment patterns seem more right each time. There are so many judgment patterns in place here, being acted out in so many complex patterns, and presenting themselves in so many aspects of society, that about all I can say now is that the fighting has been increasing the pain, the anger, the patterns of blame, and the bitterness, just as our fears judged it would happen. The most you can do now is move these feelings so that the understandings can come into your wills where changes can be made. What is significant about the fight in the Middle East and causes many to say it is a mark of the last days, is that it is a major attempt on the part of the father warriors to kill their survival chakra, while pretending they are trying to find a way to stop this fight. The best thing you can do is pull your denied survival chakra essence out of there by getting it moving in your cells. Hitler is manifest in the Middle East and has been for quite some time. The Nazi essence manifesting there is heart denial, but everyone has heart denial, so everyone is involved there. Everything you have ever felt and judged to be unloving has been cast out of your hearts and into a state of denial. The severity of the judgments determines whether it is manifest as hatred or not. Most of the blame has so far been put on the mother and the father of manifestation for having manifested creation wrong and for not being loving enough towards my light. It is time now to really look at the spirit-heart polarity and see the role we played here by defining love in the ways that we did. It has always been believed that feelings are not loving if the expression they want to take is not pleasant, but you have to learn to look deeper than that. Some of the most unpleasant expressions you might find in yourselves are actually more loving than most of what has been seen on earth so far. The blame and denial I am mentioning now has been directed at the rainbow spirits and also the Ronalokas, because they are part of the manifesting polarity of creation. They have been blamed for lack of receptivity to my light, and it has been said that this caused such serious imbalance that creation may not even be able to stay manifest. We have never really wanted to confront this issue, but it has to be brought forward now. Initially, we wanted to stay with the surface of things and say that since it had happened, it must be all right. When the spirits initially manifested without as much presence of love and light as we thought they should have, we initially wanted to say they needed time to evolve into it. Because of lack of understanding about lost will, Hart and I were unsuccessful in our attempts to later bring to the spirits what they did not have at their emergence. We had experienced the mother rejecting us, the father of manifestation rejecting us, and now the manifested spirits rejecting us. As much as we denied blaming rage and terror, we also wanted to believe that more time for experience would bring the evolution needed. This approach has not worked. The same people who have always thought of themselves as loving still think of themselves as loving. The same people who have always been impenetrable to the light are still impenetrable to the light. The same people who have always been seen as evil are still evil. The difference is that there is now so much more fragmentation that there are so many people. The ones who are seeing only love's presence think they are more loving people. The masses of people who seem to be ignoring what is happening on earth are larger than ever. The large numbers of people that are acting depraved and evil are more than ever, and are going largely unexplained in any way that might bring any healing change to them. It is time to let yourselves notice that giving in to the movement in this lost will is desperately necessary, and yet will not be any easier than it has been judged from the beginning. It has always been judged to be impossible. As much as you face the belief that it is impossible to give in to this movement and have your life go on, you are facing judgment that is as old as your original cause. One of the biggest problems we have in gaining the healing needed is that there is definite intent on the part of many spirits not to allow the movement necessary. At the time all of these emotions went into an intense state of denial, they all received the judgment that there was no possible resolution, because it was impossible to go back and start over without wiping out everything that had already manifested. Every time I considered doing this, I judged myself to be terribly unloving. And how could I possibly do this and also be loving? How could love possibly feel like destroying everything it had manifested because it had all been done wrong? Not knowing what to do with the feelings I had judged to be unloving here, they became further and further denied. What love believed it could not allow became manifest anyway in a state of denial. Red is desperate to move the denials held there for so long. Understanding must come into the ones making these denials, or red will not succeed in healing itself. Gapped rage and terror must also move, because it is holding back the movement red needs. It is the mother warriors who are protecting red, because they know what is at stake here. Meanwhile, the father warriors have missiles pointed at all of the lost will involved here. They are manifesting the gapped rage of blame and the belief that this movement must be suppressed. But that is not all they hold, as you are going to find out. The father warriors are already feeling provoked, and they are also manifesting the fear I had that I might be provoked beyond my ability to control my rage. Many feel the fear that it is not possible to hold all of this back much longer. The father warriors are holding the line against lost will, just as they have been doing since original cause. But they are not going to be able to hold the line much longer. What is going to happen when lost will breaks loose is very much dependent on how denials are being handled by the ones who have been making them. The understanding that most needs to get across now is that the ones who think they are the least involved are the very ones who are the most involved here. Lack of understanding and loss of faith that there will be any solution other than destruction is causing many to seek refuge behind the line being held by the father warriors. Others who think they see what the lost will is going to do if it breaks loose are trying to move out of what they think is harm's way. Both movements will find that there is not going to be any place to hide. The third world does not have much to offer anymore to those seeking to escape the father warriors, because gapped rage has been heavily pressuring the survival there. Meanwhile, infiltration behind their own line is making the father warriors feel like they are having to spread their forces too thin. They are showing their feelings of overwhelmment by calling for more and more military presence and more of a police state, while the lost will is seeming to give them more and more reason to believe it is necessary. The father warriors have been incapable of learning the lessons of history and have conveniently forgotten Atlantis because they have been unable to receive anything from me since I initially empowered them. This is why I say that gapped rage and terror need to move before there is a holocaust that makes what Hitler did look suddenly diminished. The angels who have become trapped on earth by their guilt have retreated, for the most part, inside the line being held by the father warriors, and are allowing them to act as a buffer zone. They are sending out only a few angels of mercy as a token ministry to the lost will, just as they did in original cause. The angels think they are being very loving to help at all, because they insist they do not have involvement here. These angels of mercy are actually guilt on the part of the angels who have much more involvement in what is happening than they have been wanting to allow themselves or anyone else to recognize or realize. Most of the focus of the angels is toward lifting themselves above what is happening on earth, with intent to leave earth as soon as possible. They seek to escape to the music of the spheres, while lost will is screaming louder and louder in the desperate agony of not being received and of being unable to hold its pain any longer. Guilt is all that is causing the spirit polarity to listen to the lost will from time to time, because spirit polarity has not moved what is in the way of actually receiving the will here. If you listen to New Age music, you may not like what the heavy metal bands are doing and saying. But if you are going to understand lost will, you need to see how the heavy metal bands are the mother warriors, pleading the case of lost will. Metallica's original and often censored music video 1 is a good example of images of father warriors juxtaposed against the plight of the lost will. In fact, the more you learn to see, the more you will see that the message is all around you, but it is not being received or understood by what it really is. Alleviating the suffering out there is not even possible as long as more lost will is continually being created. If you want to do the very most you can do, you need to move what you have so deeply denied with yourselves. Looking at it now, it is exceedingly amazing to me that what I needed to understand was so obvious, yet it took me so long to get it. There is terror in the will that it cannot break through the obtuseness of spirit here. And indeed, unless spirit moves its resistance to receiving the will cannot get access to the spirit. There is hating, blaming rage that needs to move in the will toward my light and all of the spirit polarity for being so insensitive, detached, disconnected, and focused only on what we choose to see, that the will was unable to get across to us regarding what our denials were doing to the will. The lost will is so utterly, desperately enraged and terrified that we are leaving it in the unbearable tortures of hell, that lost will is threatening to push buttons and blow up everything, if that is what it takes to make the point that it cannot stand its unbearable suffering anymore. The father warriors are nervously watching this, without being able to understand that they are holding the gapped rage spirit feels toward the will. Spirit is enraged at the will for all of the same reasons the will is enraged at the spirit. There is much movement that needs to take place here for spirit to really realize that everything it hates about the will is only the will reflecting feelings spirit actually has, but has pushed into a state of denial because of lack of acceptance for them. Because the father warriors denied emotions have to gain their movement at the source, the father warriors are still maintaining readiness to get the drop on the lost will by pushing the buttons first if necessary. Spirit polarity must realize its causal role in all of these problems, with which it has been saying it has no involvement. Lost will is hysterical over being pushed to the point where survival doesn't seem possible anymore. The only conclusion it has been able to draw from this is that we have intent to kill it. Lost will does not want to move unless healing is going to happen for it, and yet lost will is going to have to move sooner no matter what happens because it cannot hold back anymore. If lost will has to manifest its movement in a state of denial without getting the acceptance it needs from within, doomsday at its worst level is going to break loose. If lost will manages to break across the line being held by the Father Warriors without getting the feeling that Spirit is going to receive it and give it what it needs, then it will pillage and plunder, rape, loot, and grab for whatever it can get. Lost will's rage wants to rip Spirit's abundance away from it and beat Spirit up for its stupidity and insensitivity. Lost will wants to rip Spirit's throat out for proselytizing, speaking platitudes, and making rhetorical statements that have nothing to do with the terrible reality lost will has been shoved into. Lost will wants to break Spirit's bones for not moving to help it, and throw Spirit out into the darkness to suffer what it has gone through. If this happens in a state of denial, and there are any survivors left, it will be much like what you see on television where the road warriors have taken over. Most aggravating to the lost will are those who want to make light of what I am saying here by claiming they do not see the vulnerability of the Western nations to this sort of thing happening. Spirit that denies will can never feel what the will has gone through until it decides it needs to. Because of this, lost will can only vent its rage rampaging. It can never be avenged unless it turns toward my light. If lost will does not move in a state of denial, this hell will break loose upon those who are not moving in their wills. When lost will breaks loose and rushes over the line in a state of denial in the body, heart attack is the result. It is extremely painful, unfortunate, and difficult that we have created such a situation. But it also was not possible to move in advance, having the understanding necessary to heal it. Movement in advance of the understanding necessary can create new problems that are unforeseen at the outset. It is also true that understandings cannot all be gained in advance of the movement that creates experience. It is the will's role in an undenied state to feel the situation for us and tell us whether we are willing to risk having the experience or not. This is what healing must bring to us. But this is something we have never had because of our initial problems. Spirit must take responsibility for the way it handled things. It did not like feeling in the will. Spirit did not allow the will to give the input necessary. Spirit went cold toward the will here and abandoned it, thereby disconnecting from the rage Spirit felt about what was perceived to be stubborn opposition from the will. From this place of gapped rage, Spirit gave nothing to the will and secretly delighted in the suffering this caused, while also being able to disclaim responsibility for it by being able to say, "I'm not doing anything," when it was precisely the not doing anything that was causing the will's pain. Spirit has tried to pretend all along that it is more conscious than it really is, and has done this by telling the will it has not been giving the right reflection here. Guilt is most of the reason the will held back and did not press the issue, But gapped rage drastically amplified the problem when Spirit allowed it to force the will to hold whatever Spirit did not want to see or feel. This has cost us a lot in terms of gaining the understandings needed and in terms of the suffering that has already taken place. And yet, the emotional charge here is so immense, it cannot be gone past in favor of the understandings being given now. Most of the time the healing process is going to be spent dissipating the charge that has built up here. It is simply not enough for Spirit to say, "Well, I am here now," as though that has the power to brush aside all of the backlog of suffering. It is lacking compassion, and the truth of the matter is that no matter how much Spirit wants to claim it is present for the will, it is not present wherever it is not vibrating in response to the will. The gapped rage that has been holding the will down represents an enormous amount of lost consciousness, lost power, and lost vibration. It is a terrible area to have to go into, but it is necessary. There is no other way out. You cannot go up anymore because too much of you is already chained in darkness. If you want to go up, you are going to have to go down firsthand, get your own lost will. You are going to find that unless you go down and get your lost will, you are not going to survive. You are already dying of asphyxiation or loss of ability to vibrate, whether or not you have noticed it yet. You are terrified to go down into the darkness you believe you cannot vibrate, but you are hiding this terror in belief systems that say it is not necessary. You are trapped and are avoiding it by saying you can leave. You do leave. You are going to leave, or you are having such a good time. You don't want to leave. The truth of the matter is, you are unable to move up into the light you need to nourish you. You are caught in between, afraid to go down and unable to come up. Where you are unable to breathe the air, drink the water, or assimilate the food. In short, you can't get nourished. You are in a state of terror, but your terror is in a state of denial. Guilt and love mixed together stopped me from totally destroying the parts of creation I hated so much. This is also what stopped the mother from destroying what she hated. Heart and body are also involved here. They also hated spirit and will for the imbalances we were causing in them. They shoved this into a state of denial, believing it was wrong to blame us for their problems. Even though they will come into balance as spirit and will do, they still need to move what they have been holding back for so long in order to move along with us. Hatred is not love in the sense that it feels nothing that love feels. And yet, people say that love and hatred are very close together. This statement is based more on the observation of how love turns into hatred than the other way around. What needs to be understood in this healing is how to go into hatred and turn it back into love by expanding your definition of what love is until all the feelings you have are included and the feeling in them is one of lovingness. Love is not a matter of what you say and do. It is a matter of how it feels when you say and do it. Lost will, moving without understanding, has caused some of the greatest devastation in history. Spirit polarity has been seen as the victim of this rather than as causal here. But spirit polarity was only able to look as perfect as it did by virtue of what it was allowing to drop away from itself and into the lost will. The gap between the lost will and the spirit has been filled with guilt and darkness, which has kept both sides apart. As a result, both sides have been unable to receive one another, but they have also been unable to kill one another as thoroughly as they might have otherwise. Without guilt, my fear told me, there would be no mother left to heal, and no body either for that matter. Even now, their situation is so perilous, we are not a moment too soon in trying to save them. Guilt did not hold you back well enough, the mother answers, because you have been so busy denying your guilt that your gapped rage had access to us all along. The mother is not wrong here. Guilt is going to move back without a problem compared to the problem we are going to have with denied guilt. Denied guilt is more cruel than guilt and has led the will into the most painful deaths ever experienced, while claiming it was love doing this. Gapped rage has been the enforcer of many things that I, in my guilt, would not allow myself to openly enforce in creation. Gapped rage came forth in the form of the father warriors to enforce all of the things I feared it would be too unloving of me to enforce. This rage has not had guilt. It has had denied guilt and has set itself up as the authority that is right. The will essence that feared it was wrong to feel as it did took in the guilt that allowed the father warriors to blame it. You do not need to be a father warrior to have gapped rage. You are more likely to have gapped rage move in you if you are not a father warrior. The father warriors are the form this rage has taken on for the many who have denied it out of themselves. The mother warriors, on the other hand, finally emerged as the mother's response to feeling her life so threatened by my gapped rage that she had to move in response to it. Survival terror is what both of these orders of spirits hate the most, and both have killed to avoid it. I am giving some understandings now, because lost will cannot move without them. But I cannot give very many. More understanding is not necessarily better, because understandings cannot be seen for what they really are unless you move the emotions involved. Understandings that aren't given in response to the will's movement to receive them might as well be guilt or anything else, because they are not relevant to the situation. You cannot go past emotions and find healing. For example, if you tell yourself you should not be angry at someone because you already know it is not their fault, you cannot move the blaming rage you feel and have been holding back for so long. If you change your behavior toward them based on some understanding your mind has received, your emotional body is still vibrating the same. Because the role of emotions has been so ignored, there are many people who think they can take a negative energy and convert it into a positive energy, when in actuality they aren't doing anything but mind games and form changes. The energy is still vibrating the same and becomes not unlike the proverbial wolf in sheep's clothing. If you are spirit polarized, your level of seeming understanding may be your greatest stumbling block to freeing your will if you tell yourself that what you are feeling is irrational or unjustifiable. If you are will polarized, your guilt may be your biggest stumbling block. Therefore, no matter how irrational or unjustified you may be telling yourself your feelings are in certain areas, you must allow them to come into expression if you want to heal your denials. But I also want to remind you that this is why I have cautioned you to move them first with yourself. It is not necessary, especially in the beginning, to give them to the one who is triggering you, but if it happens, it is not wrong.